can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now let's see if I can advance. Okay, I don't know if many of you have been involved with the citizen or community science program before, but Mary Ellen Hannibal has written a wonderful book all about citizen science, which has become more and more important in days when we're looking at the potential impacts of climate change, and there aren't enough biologists out there to monitor birds, monitor plant life, get baseline data on all of these things so that there's some benchmark as these changes occur. And so your role has become more and more vital to those that manage our resources and have to make management decisions and need some information in which to do so. And Mary Ellen says that if you want to deepen your experience of life, the first thing to do is start observing. And as long as we're out there observing, we may as well be recording what we're seeing, documenting it, and sharing it with others. It's a way of observing with consequences. So as I said before, we're a chapter of the Seabird Protection Network, and they operate up and down the coast in the state of California. And why are we monitoring the seabird success? Well, they're the top of the food chain, and so they're impacted by every change that happens throughout the entire marine ecosystem. So they're sentinels. They're kind of like the canary in the coal mine. They're good indicators of the health of the ecosystem, and they're visible. They're in the air, and so you can see them. You can see their productivity when they're nesting and raising their families. And it's a much more obvious indicator than if you're diving and counting fish or counting krill or counting the food chain underwater. Climate change obviously has a profound impact on marine ecosystems. We all saw that in 2014, 2015, 2016 with the blob, which was a marine heat wave that happened off of our coast. And monitoring seabirds helps us track climate-related changes, which ultimately impacts. There's one of the climate impacts is the possibility of habitat loss with sea level rise. And an example of that is our little oyster catchers who breed on offshore rocks. And I'm not sure where they're going to go when those rocks are underwater with sea level rise. But one of the California naturalists, no, I'm sorry, she was a climate students, did a wonderful pamphlet for us on the impact on 4 or 5 seabirds and shorebirds of climate change, and we'll share that with you. And becoming familiar with family life is just fun. They're fun to watch. So I'm going to start off with a slideshow. It's a photo essay of family life of these birds on the coast. And then I'm going to follow up with an overview of, we only monitor a few species. They're all easily identifiable. It takes a little experience to distinguish the 3 species of cormorants, but you're always working with an experienced mentor, and it becomes easier than you might imagine. Up here on the upper left, we have a Brandt's cormorant, and they're the largest and stockiest of the 3 species of cormorants on our coast. Is my pointer showing, by the way?
Yes.
It is? Okay, good. On the top middle here are the smallest of our cormorants, the pelagic cormorants. And they always nest on sheer vertical cliffs, little tiny shelves. When you see them on a rock wall, they just seem like an amorphous group of black birds. But if you spend some time with them, I've really become very, very fond of them because of these little tiny shelves that they nest on. There's no such thing as sibling rivalry. It just simply wouldn't work. They're very, very affectionate. They're very, very loving. And I've really become quite fond of them. And the top right here is a common murre. They're kind of like our penguins. They stand upright. They began breeding on Gull Rock in 2012. I had been scoping at Brandt's Cormorant colony there for a few years before then, and they just suddenly showed up. Last year and the year before, what was it, Bill? You counted 8,000 of them out there,
Yeah.
and yeah, 8,000. And then we learned when the California Coastal National Monument had a little bit of funding at the end of the year, a couple of years ago, they hired a biologist to do a count of an aerial photograph of Gull Rock, which we compared with our counts for that year. And we learned that we only see half of them. So they have now taken over Gull Rock, and they have now moved into Bodega Rock, which is in the middle of Bodega Bay. They've joined the cormorant colony there. And the last couple of years, we've seen them on the west side of Bodega Head. And so they only have one chick. They're very, very productive. They're interesting because they're tiny, but they arrive earlier than the other birds. And so they kind of dig in, establish their territory. And one theory about the increasing numbers of them down here is that they have been chased off of their territory as in Northern California and Oregon because of harassment by bald eagles. And this is why we were so concerned at the beginning of last year when the Jenner eagles were harassing them out on Gull Rock. The lower left-hand corner here are Diane's Frenchies, and these are the pigeon guillemots. They tend to nest in crevices, and they kind of burrow inside of the rocks, but they're easily seen when they're out and about because of their black and white foliage, excuse me, plumage, and bright red mouths and bright red feet. They're very, very playful. They're a lot of fun to watch. If any of you explore down at Pinnacle Gulch off of south of Doran, off of Bodega Bay, they nest on Pinnacle Rock there. There are just hundreds of them, and they're jumping off and on and off and off the rock. They're really a lot of fun to watch. The middle bottom here is a double-crested cormorant, and this is the only one of our cormorants that will also nest inland. If you walk around Spring Lake in Santa Rosa, you'll see them nesting in trees. And you can identify them in the air because they have this crooked little neck here. But they also are marine birds, as are the other species. And then this is the favorite of many of us, and it's the black oyster catcher. And this is a view of one of the rocks off of the west side of Bodega Bay. And so it's quite a community. We have the Brandt's cormorants here, and they're on the nests of red algae. We have a couple of the common murres back here. We have the western gulls, and it's hard to make them out because they're very well camouflaged, but there are a couple of spotted chicks here. They're fuzzy and have little spots on their heads, and they're very well camouflaged for the granite environment out there. And actually, there's a couple of pelicans here too, and we do count the pelicans. They don't breed up here. They breed in Southern California, but they arrive in the middle of our breeding season. And because they have a tendency to kind of take over a rock and can really have an impact on our nesting birds, we're also counting them. So the season begins with courtship, and Diane mentioned when they get all gussied up for courting. This is a double-crested cormorant up here in the corner, and you can see the crests here. They have gold skin on their faces and on their gulars, their pouches. Their eyes become this incredible color of turquoise. And the photograph here doesn't show it, but there are actually turquoise beads around each of the eyes. And the inside of the mouth becomes this deep azure blue, which is really, really striking. And this bird, the only place it nests of the four sites is Gleason on a Saturday morning. And so you get a really good view of this bright blue throat through your scope there. They're really quite striking. This is a Brandt's cormorant, and this is a typical pose. He's on a nest here. He has a bright blue gular or pouch, and he's saying, "I'm ready to go." So down here we have our western gulls. Right now there are maybe 9 or 10 species of gulls that are in our area that overwinter here. The western gull is our only full-time resident that's here year-round and the only one that breeds here. So you don't have to worry about sorting gulls. We have our black oyster catchers up here, and these are the little pitch and guillemots that are showing off their red throats and feet to each other. The next step is the nest. And these are the pelagic cormorants that I was talking about that nest on these little tiny shelves. Here you can see that they're on eggs. One way you can distinguish this from the other cormorants, just for a short period of time, are these white patches on their flanks. They disappear quite quickly. In fact, the bright color of the gular and facial skin of all of the cormorants starts to fade pretty quickly once they start laying their eggs. Down here in the lower left, we have 2 species of cormorants that are nesting together. This is the Brandt's, and it is on a, whoops, sorry about that. It's on a cushion of algae. And this is the double-crested up here, and it's the only species that will use sticks for the nest. Actually, it's the only species that will also nest in trees. And our little black oyster catchers here, they prefer constructing a nest either of pebbles or of shells. And you can see how their eggs blend in perfectly with the granite off of Bodega Head. They're very well camouflaged. This nest looks very haphazard, but actually it's quite deliberate. And they actually even build practice nests early in the season. You'll see them walking along and picking up pebbles or shells, bits and pieces with those long orange mandibles and tossing them over their shoulders. And this is a mating dance, a courtship dance, but they're also quite deliberate and practiced in the placement of these pebbles and bits of shell. And this is a Brandt's cormorant that's bringing in a huge chunk of red algae to add to the nest here. And these guys are thieves. A few years ago, we were out on Bodega Head West, and at the very top of the rock was a pair of seagulls, a pair of western gulls. Right below was a pair of these Brandt's cormorants, and they were irritated with the gulls and were leaning up and were kind of barking at them. And below them was another pair of Brandt's cormorants, and because this pair in the middle wasn't paying attention to them, they were sneaking up and stealing their nesting material. So they can't be trusted. And they will add this nesting material to the nests of a previous year, so you can see how plush and large some of these nests can get. By the way, they have little crests too. These little white tufts here are part of their breeding plumage. And you can see the bright blue of their throats. This guy here is not really impressing very much of anybody with that little stick he has in his mouth. So this pair of oyster catchers is using bits of shell instead of pebbles for their nest. And when you see them, you'll see one of them on the rock, and you have to wait until the mate arrives. They take turns foraging for food. And then they do a shift change, and that gives you an opportunity to count the eggs, to see the eggs that they're sitting on. So this is a western gull, and this is a perfectly respectable nest of algae here. And we came back 2 days later, and it had grown considerably. They became a little more ambitious. And this is on a little pocket of this rock. And it started to collapse. And you can see this guy's bringing up more, thinking that's going to help. They're both trying to keep it secure. you can see this one egg up here that's very precarious. And he's trying to dump even more material onto it. Now they're attracting the attention of the other gulls. And they finally have it back together again. This pair, these birds mate for life, and they return to the same spot year after year after year. And this pair always had an only child. And I was really curious about why they only had one chick when all of the others nesting on this rock would generally have two, three, or four. And I began to realize they were the only ones that chose this funny little scoop here that didn't allow much room for more than one egg to survive and more than one chick. Our common murres are also monogamous, and they have the same mate year after year after year. However, they do keep an eye out on others in their colony, and there's a wonderful paper that's on our Google Drive on divorce in common murres. So just in case something happens to their current mate, they've also had an eye out on who else is a good provider in case they need to switch at some point. So other challenges besides an overambitious nest is there are predators that like their eggs. There's a pair of ravens that nest out there, and they have a reputation for going after eggs. I've never seen it happen. I've never witnessed it. I'm very fond of ravens, but the oyster catchers certainly are concerned about it. Here's an oyster catcher chasing a raven. I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. Is my voice breaking up?
A little bit, but we're still able to see your picture.
Okay. So it's kind of unusual to see an oyster catcher chasing a raven. Oyster catchers don't have talons. They just have this long, funny orange bill. They don't have any kind of weapons to protect themselves with, but they do have a very loud voice. And this is a pair of raven fledglings. This was their first flight. They left the nest and they landed on this rock. They landed about, 5-10 feet apart, and they're looking around. And then an oyster catcher came over and yak, 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 yapped at them, and they kind of huddled together. They do not have the attitude of an adult raven, and you can see they still have some of that pink color along the corners of their mouths, and they don't have that nice shiny black coat yet. Another predator is peregrines that nest nearby. This is a fledgling. You can tell that he's a brand new hatchier bird by the vertical bars on his breast. The adults are horizontal, and I don't know if you can make it out here, but he is a hatchling bird and has these very serious talons. They mean business. There was a pair of them that nested for years out at Gleason, and attracted the attention of a lot of photographers year after year. And there was one year where one of the monitors wrote in a note that she was finally able to see chicks, and it was in August. She had not seen baby chicks yet because the parents were always hovering over and protecting their young from the peregrines that nested nearby. And at one time she arrived there and there were the two adult peregrines and three peregrine chicks hovering over the rock. But as I said, we've since learned that they actually offer protection to these colonies. Here's a peregrine picking off a little grebe in Bodega Harbor. So we've had courtship, they've been building a nest, and then they start to raise their families. And this is a western gull. The chicks are these tiny little fuzzy things with spots. They're really, really cute. And the western gulls are tremendously patient, loving parents. One year we saw one of the chicks fall on the backside of the rock, and It was too little to make its way back up, and we were afraid that it was lost. We came back out a week later and noted that one of the parents had been going up and down that rock delivering food to that one baby until it was strong enough so that it could come up and join the rest of the family. And these chicks are really, really cute until they start getting their regular real feathers, which pop out all over their bodies except for their heads. So they have these funny little pinheads, spotted pinheads for a while. They're awkward teenagers. And here's a pair of chicks looking out at sea with one of the parents. There's still an egg left in this nest, and I'm not sure if it's actually a cracked shell that's left over or if it just wasn't viable. So here's a black oyster catcher, and when their chicks are born, um, when they first break out of the shell, and they just lie there for a couple of hours, and it's kind of concerning at first until you realize they're just exhausted from all of the work and all of the labor of breaking out of the shell. And once they kind of dry off a little bit and they get their energy back, they start running all over the rock, chasing down insects. And just like human toddlers, they like to climb. So this little guy had climbed up the rock here, and it's very loose, sandy granite that's very slippery. He started to fall down, and he has these stubby little wings and this stubby little bill, and he caught himself. And Dad here is looking on. He finally made his way back down. I can tell that this is Dad because of the eye. The black oyster catchers look alike. The parents look alike, except for the iris and the pupil of the eye. The male has a perfectly round pupil, and the female will have a little blotch that comes off, whoops, one side or the other. And that's how you can tell a male from a female. Well, he ran right back up and figured out that he was able to make his way down if he just kind of slid down sideways. So the oyster catchers go out and they forage among the mussel beds. The mussels, California mussels, are the foundation of their own little ecosystem out there. They play host to as many as 20 and 25 other species of invertebrates that live in the mussel beds, mostly worms that live between the shells. And so they bring back worms and other invertebrates they find there, little isopods, and then they'll bring back mussel meat as well. And this little guy seems so small for this huge piece of meat that was delivered to him, but he had no problem scarfing it right down. There's an egg over here, and again, I don't remember if this egg just wasn't viable or if it eventually hatched. These guys are very, very small, so they're fairly new. And as they grow a little bit older, they start to get, the bill starts to elongate here, and their legs start to grow. And the parents start bringing back whole mussel shells for them and teaching them how to extract the mussel meat. They use their bills in several different ways. Some of them are chiselers, and you'll see them working on barnacles or limpets on the rock, kind of chiseling them free. And some of them, the majority of them will use their bills like pliers, working to open the mussel shell so that they can extract the mussel meat. They don't reach sexual maturity until 5 years of age, but even after 5 years, they may not have developed the skills sufficiently enough to support a family. So now Junior here is getting a good look, and you can see all of the shells from all of the mussels that have been brought to him. And he's finally getting dinner. Okay, so these are the pelagic cormorants, and you can see these little tiny shelves that they nest on here, these sheer rock faces. This is off of Bodega Head. You'll also get a good close view of them on at Gleason, and they're on the north face of Gull Rock as well. Not Gull Rock itself, but in that area there is a rock face that is part of the mainland that they nest there as well. And here, this guy here is exercising his wings and his pectoral muscles. But you can see there's very little room there. Here's a little shelf, and these little guys are the chicks. And there, it looks like there's 3 or 4 of them. This is why I say there's no room for sibling rivalry. So here are 3 chicks, a little incredibly tiny nest. And they take turns exercising their wings and their pectoral muscles. So this is number 1. And then he's moved aside, and now it's number 2 is his turn. And he's getting quite a wingspan. And now it's this guy's turn on the end. You can see how tiny this is and how precarious it is. They have these huge feet that enable them to grip. And it's really kind of fun to watch them flying in a wind because they don't always make it on the first landing. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 attempts. And the gulls, these are those chicks, those little spotted chicks, and they've developed their actual flight feathers. And when they're exercising their wings, sometimes a gust of wind comes along and picks them up unexpectedly. And it's quite exciting for them because they're not quite ready and they're not quite sure what to do about it. So, do these wings really work? This is time to fledge. The common murres, when they fledge, they're only 3 or 4 weeks old, and they haven't yet learned how to fly. And what happens at Gull Rock and Bodega Rock is that the dads will go into the water and call for them. And it's a leap of faith. They jump and they hit the water and then they swim. And there's some wonderful videos on YouTube of the jump, and I'll send out some links to them. It's really a thrill to watch. So this is a pelagic cormorant, and his parents and siblings are down below calling to him. And he was a little bit reticent, and he finally jumped, but didn't go all the way. And he landed on this ledge here. And he finally took off. And he's hitting the water for the first time. Now, this is a pelagic bird, so seeing them hit the water, hitting the sea for the first time is really quite remarkable. And if you're out there at Bodega Head during flight school is really fun to watch. The adults, it's usually windy so that they get good lift, with their wings and they can soar. And the adults are soaring overhead, calling and encouraging the youngsters. The youngsters are dressed in brown when they're during their hatch year, and encouraging them to take off. The adults are really strong flyers, and they land beautifully. It's almost like a kite. They land just where they want to, but it's a skill that has to be developed by the chicks, and it's kind of fun to watch. They'll land and then they'll just kind of roll down the hill a little bit. So once they fledge, that's just the beginning. Among birds as a whole, only about 10% of juveniles survive their first year. The black oyster catcher fledgling success down in Monterey County in 2012 was only 15%. The black oyster catchers are so cute, and every year I tell myself not to get emotionally invested in them, but it's hard not to fall in love with them. But successful fledging is really challenging for them. It takes them 5 years to reach sexual maturity, but as I said before, they need to become sufficiently skilled at foraging in order to feed a family. Western gulls don't breed until they're 4 years of age, and all cormorant species reach sexual maturity at 2 years. So this is why their productivity is really, really important. And when I was down at Pacific Grove, I was really pleased. This was about a month before the program began, actually, in January or February of 2013. I was really pleased to see a sign down on the rocks of Pacific Grove telling people to keep your distance from both the harbor seal pupping and the black oyster catcher sites. So are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Are we supposed to provide our own scopes when we come to monitor?
No, we have all of the equipment. I'm about to get into the equipment that we provide for you. There are some people that have their own scopes and prefer to bring them, and that's fine. But we supply binoculars, scopes, a camera that we use, all of the equipment that you need. Do you have a scope?
No, we don't. We don't have a scope yet, but we have binoculars.
Okay. If you're shopping for a scope, it's kind of this is kind of a neat opportunity for you because um, we have a scope that belongs to the program, but you can also look through, since some people bring their own scopes, you can also look through theirs and you know, get a little bit of experience with other models and other manufacturers as well. There's really quite a variety in the both the quality and the handling of different scopes. I have
Pawn shops.
a mid-range scope and mid-range binoculars, and I kind of try to avoid looking through really, really expensive ones because I want to be happy with what I have, but then I don't want to be I don't want to be out worrying about it either. Is your hand up, Kathy?
It is. Yeah, it is. I just wanted to add, that when you go out to certain sites, like out at Gull Rock, there'll be multiple scopes out there because we're usually counting in tandem because there's so many MERS out there. So there'll always be like two scopes going. Like out at Gleason, since we aren't looking as at much, we usually only have one scope out there. So Hollis is right. Many people will bring their own scope because some sites really do, like Gull Rock, that I'm familiar with, needs two scopes because two people need to be counting. They count at the same time.
And Gull Rock is about a third of a mile offshore, as is Bodega Rock. And Rich, who does Bodega Rock, often brings his own scope.
Mm-hmm.
Gleason's kind of in the middle, and the west side of Bodega Head, you don't even need a scope.
Yeah.
Everything is really close in, other than the rock faces going south, where the pelagic cormorants nest. And then you do need a scope for those nests that are farther south, that go all the way down to the end, the southern tip.
Of the head.
Yes.
Just want to say thanks a lot. I learned a lot. I enjoyed it. Have a wonderful evening.
Well, thank you, but I've got more.
More,
you have
I
to-
love it.
Okay, if you have to go, that's fine though.
I have a question. What's the approximate cost or range of cost of a scope? Maybe a mid-range one, just an idea.
A mid-range one is probably about 800 to 1,000. The higher quality ones get you up into 2,500, you know, the 3,000 range. There was one thing you can do is you can kind of keep an eye on eBay
Mhm.
for used equipment. Um, I would, you know, having a lower quality scope is kind of irritating. You're not happy with it. I generally go for the sweet spot because I don't want to be worrying about my equipment either. I'm my binoculars I'm hard on. I also do beach watch surveys for the sanctuary. So I'm always setting my binoculars down. They pick up sand. It's I don't take as good care of them as I could because of what I'm doing in the environment that I'm in. And if I had binoculars that were $1,500 to $2,000, I wouldn't be enjoying them.
Mhm.
Okay. The view would be better, but it would not be as much fun for me. So you kind of have to find, depending on your budget and what you're doing, and I'm kind of an optics freak, so I like seeing what I like to see.
Mhm.
And I also have cataracts, so I notice that I'm not seeing the detail that I used to see. So the optical quality is important to me, but I have to find that sweet spot to where I'm out there having fun with my equipment and not stressing
Thank you.
about it too. Um, and up until COVID, there used to be in the Sonoma Valley, in the town of Sonoma, there used to be in September an optics and nature fair. And it was wonderful because the bee people were there and the bird people were there and the badger people were there. But also, they would have 8 to 10 different optics manufacturers there showing their wares. And it was a terrific opportunity to go from booth to booth to booth to booth, getting hands-on experience with their binoculars and their scopes. And sadly, it hasn't started up again since we got through with COVID, which is really a shame because you don't often get that kind of opportunity to compare, directly within a short period of time. But one thing about going out with our group here is that you can get exposed to different levels of quality. And also the weight makes a difference as well. With a scope, you need to have a tripod. And if you're just parking your car and getting out and setting up your tripod and your scope, the weight isn't an issue for you as far as carrying it goes. However, a lightweight tripod tends to move around in the wind. And of course, when you have that kind of magnification, then all of that quivering in the wind is magnified as well. So you also need a good tripod. Are there any other questions before I go on about some species ID and the codes? Okay, I'm not watching the chat, so you can put questions in the chat, but I would really kind of prefer if you just kind of interrupt me. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the species that we monitor out here, and there are standard 4-letter codes that are used. You'll see them on our data forms. And here we've got the western gull, common murre, pigeon guillemot, brown pelican, and peregrine falcon. And the standard that's used for construction of the 4-letter codes is most of these species have 2 words in their name. And if you pick the first 2 letters of each of the words, that gives you the code. So the western gull is Wegu, common murre is COMU, the pigeon guillemot, PIGU, brown pelican, and peregrine falcon. Surfbird is only 1 word. So what they've done is they take the first 4 letters of that word to create their code of surf. And here are the cormorants, and the cormorants go a little differently. The pelagic cormorant follows the standard. It's a PECO. Double-crested cormorant, we're now dealing with 3 words. And so the code is the first letter of the first word, first letter of the second word, and the first 2 letters of the third word. So it's DCCO. Brandt's cormorant is an outlier. If it were to follow the standard construction, it would be a BRCO, but this is the code used for a brown cowbird. And so to avoid that kind of confusion, they've taken the first 3 letters of the first word, and so a Brandt's cormorant is a brack. And a Canada goose can be confused with a cackling goose. And so, like the Brandt's cormorant, that's a CANG. And by the way, we do have 1 pair of Canada geese out at Gleason, as well as the 3 species of corms. So the Western gull, as I said, this is the only resident gull year-round that breeds here. And it has this dark mantle. He's a handsome guy. And what's the 4-letter code? Can somebody tell me?
Uyghur.
Yeah. And I've shown you this slide of a little Western gull family. And here's a common murre family. And I told you they look like the little penguins. And what is the 4-letter code for common murre?
It would be COMU.
Right, Camu.
Come.
You'll hear us talking about commas and we try to avoid the jargon, but it's our abbreviations for when we're speaking about them as well. And on our we do have a legend that's in our clipboard that has all of these abbreviations, and you'll learn them rather quickly. So the pigeon guillemot, what would be the 4-letter code? PIGU. And the 3 cormorant species. Now, here is the little pelagic, and it is the skinniest and the smallest of the 3 species. And it has a very slender neck. And when it's breeding, it has this wonderful red color, this red skin on its face. And this is the Brandt's that has the blue eye and the bright blue gular or pouch. And this is the double-crested, whose pouch is kind of yellow or golden color. And the wing feathers look different from the back, too. They look kind of like they're scalloped. There's a pattern to them. So again, this is the Brandt's, and it's the bright blue gular. And this is the outlier. So the code is a brack. And the double-crested is the one that, if you'll see them in the air, they have a little crooked neck here, where the other 2 species have a straight neck. This is a younger double-crested cormorant, and you can tell because the breast feathers, instead of being dark, are beige in color. And this is the breeding costume here. So what is the 4-letter code for the double-crested? Does anybody remember? Kathy's nodding.
DCCO.
That's correct.
You know, one thing I want to say about when you're looking at these cormorants, because the double-crested and the Brandt's can look alike a little bit when you're just eyeballing them on a rock, because you'll see this blue, and that blue is always going to be associated with the Brandt's. But the double-crested will often have, as you can see, a blue inside its mouth, and it kind of looks like blue lipstick. And you have to sometimes do a double take, and then they get the fancy eyebrows where the Brandt's gets the kind of the whiskers. But you just have to, because they can start looking a lot alike during breeding season. There's like these little bitty things, but like I said, the yellow is the biggest identifier. But when they're breeding, that blue lipstick sometimes can be pretty prominent.
And Kathy, they have different favorite terrains too.
This is true. Yep.
So if you have a rock that's flat on top like Gleason is,
Mhm.
It slopes on the sides. The Brandt's cormorant, see now I'm using the jargon here. They prefer the flat level areas up on the top. Where the double-crested will nest there, but the double-crested like those little slopes as well.
Mhm.
And the pelagic like those sheer rock faces, those vertical rock faces. And so sometimes if you can't distinguish them by something in their plumage, or they have distinct postures too, but that takes a while that takes some experience. It takes some experience in being around them for a while to recognize them by their postures. But you can also check the terrain, because that's another clue.
Mhm.
And this is the pelagic, and they're the ones that like these little tiny ledges and have the red around the mouth here. And what's the 4-letter code for the pelagic? PECO. So pop quiz, the one on the bottom here, which cormorant is that?
The Brent,
And the upper right
double crested,
and the left?
pelagic.
Pelagic.
And I showed this slide before in the photo essay. If you see sticks, you know it's a double-crested. It's the only one of the three that will use sticks as nesting material, but they'll also use vegetation.
Now, Hollis, I was wondering, do the pelagic, will they entirely stay on the sheer cliffs, or will they sometimes hang out on the top? And
They'll roost on the top. They'll hang out on the top. I do beach watch surveys of Miwok Beach, which is a rocky intertidal area. And there are some pelagics that will hang out on the tops of rocks there. They like to fish just beyond those rocks. And I have to watch carefully. We record all of the live and dead vertebrates that we see. And I always have to look at them carefully, because I'm expecting them to be on one of those vertical sheer faces, but they're not breeding there. They're just roosting there.
okay,
And so you will see them roosting there, but they will not nest in that area.
thanks.
So here's our black oyster catcher. And does anybody remember the 4-letter code for the black oyster catcher? It's
That's
Bloy.
You get hanging around these seabirders and you start talking different.
Yeah. And the Canada goose again was one of the outliers, because if it followed the standard of CAGU, it would be confused with the cackling goose. And I don't understand it, because the Canada goose is more common than the cackling goose. Just like with the Brandt's cormorants, they're much more, well, maybe they're much more common than a brown cowbird, but maybe that's just because I hang out by the ocean. But this is a CANG. And by the way, this photograph was taken at Gleason. One of the things that I love about Gleason are the wildflowers in the spring. This is the sea thrift that's in bloom
You
here.
mentioned surfbird earlier, and you going through the 4 letters. Do you
Yes.
count those as well?
They don't breed there,
Okay.
but they'll come in a large flock of 100 of them.
Okay.
And land and chatter. So there is a space on the form for other species that we included. As I said, there's the brown pelicans. They actually breed in Southern California. They're one of the 3 amigos. They come up north with the elegant terns and with can't believe I'm drawing a blank on the 3rd amigo. But when they arrive before our birds are finished breeding. And so they have not yet fledged, they're still raising young on the rocks. And the brown pelicans, they're large birds, and they can take over a rock. And it's not generally too much of a problem unless it's a bad food year for the pelicans. And they have been known to predate on chicks.
Okay.
And so we do count them when they arrive on our forms because they do have an impact on our nesting birds.
Helpful. Thanks.
And then the common raven, can somebody guess the 4-letter code for a common raven? It's Cora. It's CORA. And Lisa, this is my friend.
Right. Cora could even be a name.
Yes. Isn't he handsome? This fellow lived out on the Cordham Trail and I knew him for about 20 years and very fond of ravens, as is Lisa. And a peregrine falcon, the 4-letter code is PEFA. It follows. And this is an adult. And I was talking about the no, I'm sorry. This is still a youngster. Okay, species ID quiz. Who's this guy up in the upper left?
Common here.
And to the right?
Black oyster catcher.
And down here?
Western
Bracks.
gold.
Western gull. And a brant.
Right.
See, it's easy. And this nest up here?
Oh, that's the raven.
It's a little
Right.
raven.
And down here? On the left?
That's one of the cormorants.
Oh, that's double crested.
Big one.
Double.
He's got that.
Pelagic cormorant.
That's pelagic, right? And you
Oh,
can
pelagic.
tell.
Oh, are you going to, oh, I thought you were going to the side.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah, my pointer is small here, but it's the one on the left here. You can tell by the white patches. The
Yeah.
pelagic is the only one that sports those white
Yeah.
flanks. And they lose those white flanks very, very quickly. So when they have chicks, they don't necessarily have them. So if you see a white flank, you know it's a pelagic, but because it doesn't have one, doesn't mean that it's not a pelagic.
You can gill them on.
And down here, the guillemot, and what do we have up here?
It's the brack.
That the double crested that has the big
That's a double crested.
Yeah, double crested.
Orange.
the orange and the ears.
We had one
Ears.
artist monitor one year that says, "Oh, I'd love to make a mask." Okay, so there's a question about the equipment. We have a weather instrument, a kestrel. Some people like to use it, some people don't. It's strictly up to you. On our data sheets, we do have spaces for the wind and the temperature. And some people just kind of find the kestrel to be a pain. Others prefer it. So you can either use a Beaufort scale for the wind and your phone or something for the temperature. That's up to you. We supply binoculars, a tripod, spotting scope, camera, microclaws for cleaning the optics, a clipboard, data sheets, section maps I'll talk about, pencils and clicker counters. If you're doing an area like either Bodega Rock or Gull Rock, a clicker counter comes in handy when you're actually doing your counting because the birds are so numerous. You can bring in your own field guide if you like. Which bird is this?
The brant. It has
You got it. We don't monitor during heavy rain, dense fog, or high wind. We're concerned about your safety. Can you name this bird?
logic.
It has the white patches here,
Yep, it's on a shear wall.
and it's in a sheer wall. Actually, this is a pretty nice little
Yeah,
spot. It's found, it's found here. Much better than those little shells, those funky little shells. They feel safe there. They like to nest there because they feel safe from aerial predators. However, out at Gleason, they have been picked off on occasion by the peregrines. Peregrines are very skilled flyers, so it's not totally a secure area for them. We have a Google Drive, which has the schedule. It has a contact list. It has data forms. Once a month, I collect all of the completed data sheets and scan them and send the scans up to the Google Drive. So at any time you can look back and see what's happened, like a month ago. Also, you can see what's happened last year or the year before. All of them, it goes back since we started monitoring in 2013 so that you can look at a history if you like. And I'll send out the link to the Google Drive. What is this? Which cormorant is this on the bottom down here? By the time you leave tonight, you're going to have them all nailed down for sure.
Brant.
Brant, and in the upper right,
Double crested.
and the left.
Logic.
Pelagic.
Pelagic.
Oh, on that link you mentioned, it was it's something you sent today had a link in the Google Drive, and it said you had to ask permission.
I know, and I'm not quite sure what happened because when I got that link, I did check to make sure that you had access to it other than just viewing. And
yeah.
but then I was tired last night, so maybe I screwed up.
I'll
And that's
try it
where
again. Thank you.
maybe I didn't ask myself this morning, so I just, attached everything.
Thank you.
So for the data collection, please use a mechanical pencil. We supply them. Print instead of using cursive. Don't erase. If you want to correct a count, strike it out and put in your corrected count. And the reason why is that if we have a major disturbance, there could be fines that are involved depending on the source of the disturbance and the impact of the disturbance. And our sister program up at Sea Ranch, north of us, was monitoring Wallala Island, and the commercial interests up there like to set off fireworks over the island on the 4th of July. And of course, this is right in the middle of their breeding season. And so they were documenting the impact of these fireworks and went to court. And there is a tendency to think of community science as bad science. And so we want to be very, very strict and careful about the protocols. And that is why we do not erase our forms, but we strike out either a mistake or an earlier count. You might put in a count of 24 or something, a couple more arrive, just strike it out and then correct it with a 26. Include lots of notes. The counts are important, but your notes really tell the story. They really paint a picture of what's going on in the environment. And an example is down at Bodega Rock 4 or 5 years ago. Rich made a note. He said, "Oh, interesting. There are a couple of common murres down here in the water." And it was the first time he had seen them there because all of them were breeding up in Gull Rock, which is north of Bodega Bay. And it was just kind of an interesting observation at the time. They're now breeding there. There were, how many of them were there last year? 1,500 of them already. And so these little incidental things that you just might notice that are going on around you may mean something to us a year or two from now. But they also, as I said, paint a picture of the entire environment. And these aren't isolated colonies. As I said before, one of the things that we have found really interesting is the interaction between the species. The common murres arrive early, and so they can stake out their territory. And what they had done is they had prospected the Brandt's cormorants colony on Gull Rock and then moved in. And because they arrived earlier than the larger cormorants, they eventually pushed the corms out, except for 1 year where Bill and Ellie were arriving in the morning and they would see all of the common murres rafting on the water and not climbing the rock because the peregrines were roosting on the top of Gull Rock. What it did was it caused enough of a delay for the common murres establishing their nesting territory, that it gave the branch cormorants an opportunity to regain some real estate. So there's an interesting relationship between all of the neighbors that are going on there as well. And we're constantly learning. One of the literature says that it's an uncommon occurrence to watch the formation of a common murre colony, normally because they occur out at sea. And we are now watching the formation of a third colony off of our coast. So include lots of notes. If there are no birds, if you're doing, for instance, Gleason, you're going to enter a 0 for common murres. And if there are birds that are not counted for some reason, like if the fog comes in and you could not complete your count, don't put a 0, but put in an X. And this is all on a legend that is on the clipboard that that we supply with our forms. And again, include lots of notes. And this is what our primary data form looks like. And here's where those four-letter codes come into play. And we have room for notes. And on the back side, we have room for a lot of notes here. And you'll notice that here we have spaces for counting pinnipeds. The only place that we count pinnipeds is Bodega Rock. Bodega Rock is a really interesting community. It's been branch cormorants that share the rock with large California sea lions and as many as 5 or 6 huge stellar sea lion bulls. And the reason we count them there is that so far, those big sea lions have respected the breeding territory of the cormorants. And we don't quite understand why, but they do. One year they started to move into the territory of the breeding birds. And that's when we started counting them once again, because we didn't know if the population was increasing. And so if there was some kind of population pressure, it was causing them to expand their territory. But we will count the pinnipeds there. And that's the only site where you have to worry about that. This is a picture of Gull Rock, and you can see all of these common murres here. And actually, it's not as crowded as it is on occasion. And you'll notice they're in different sections here of the rock. So what we've done is we've created a sectional map here so that you can count. This is where there are like 8,000 birds to count. What you can do is you can count by section. So if you're interrupted or if your eyes get tired, you can stop after you do sections 1, 2, and 3, take a break, and then go to 4, 5, or 6. There's another reason for this. As I said, when we first started this program in 2013, the common murre were new, and we didn't know if they would be pushing the branch cormorants out because they were arriving earlier. And so they have kind of the same preferred terrain. And this way we could track where they were breeding as opposed to the cormorants. And sure enough, they were pushing the cormorants onto the less desirable territory on the rock. So it served 2 purposes at the time. And these are 2 other rocks that they breed on, as well as Gull Rock. And what we do is we have a supplemental sheet for Gull. So we do our first counts here and record them here. And these are the sections on Gull Rock, so that you can count just the top south, top central, etc., all the way down, and then bring the totals over to the primary data sheet. And when you go out with experienced monitors, they'll show you how to do this. These are the little subcolonies, these 2 other rocks that are close by where there's breeding territory going on. And this is the northern cliff that I was talking about. It's actually on Peaked Hill, where the Pico, the pelagic cormorants, nest. Bodega Rock is in the middle of Bodega Bay. You're looking right down the throat of the San Andreas fault line there, down at the entrance of Wallace Bay. This is the rock that cormorant colony, branch cormorant colony, but it's shared with, you can see if the sea lions down here. And over on the west side of the rock, there's a lot of large California sea lions, and there are cormorants all the way across. And this rock, since this photograph was taken last year, we had a total of 1,500 common murre that are now sharing this rock. Those are our little penguins. So this has become quite an interesting community. And this is the rock where we count the pinnipeds as well as the breeding birds. We do not use a supplemental form here. Bodega Head West, we do a little differently than the other sites. And the reason why is that this is the marine protected area that is offshore here. And when the marine protected area was first implemented in 2010, Point Blue did some baseline counts. And the reason why was because they wanted to be able to later on determine the effectiveness of protecting this area from fishing. And they counted birds on the water, which we don't do on our other sites. And so we also count the birds on the water just so that we're consistent with their count. And the collection of rocks that we count off of Bodega Head West are consistent with those that they counted as a subcolony. And the reason why is because we want to be able to compare our counts to theirs if necessary. So we have a main rock here. A lot of the photographs that were in my photo essay were of was breeding activity on this large rock here. It's the one, if you're looking for whales, it's that large rock that's immediately offshore. These are the rock faces that are heading south, and this is where the pelagic corms will nest, these little shelves all the way down. There was a drone that was flown illegally a couple of years ago in the middle of the breeding season, and we lost a whole wall of pelagic cormorants. The chicks were only a week old. The oyster catcher chicks had just hatched. They were just a day or two old. And they are just now starting to nest there again, once again. So at the Bodega Head, we have a supplemental sheet that we use for our counts there because we have so many different rocks that we're counting. And here we have where we put our counts for birds that we see on the water, but we don't transfer those over to the main data sheet. This is what it looks like when it's filled out. There's some incidental notes here about some other birds that are seen nearby. Here was a boat that was fishing too close. And that's it. So, does anybody have any questions? You all know your birds and your 4-letter codes. Teresa.
And what does pelagic mean?
Seagoing. And that's why in the photo essay, there was that one sequence of photographs of the pelagic cormorant that was, it was a little shyer, it was a little hesitant about coming off of the rock, and its family was down below calling for it. And that's why when I saw it hit the water for the first time, it was such a thrill because this is a pelagic bird that makes its living in the water there.
Okay.
Yeah. So next steps. Tomorrow I'll be sending out a link to the Google Drive, and I'll make sure that it, I'll try to make sure that it works. I'll also be sending out a questionnaire asking if you're interested in joining us this year. You don't have to commit. You can shadow if you like. I really recommend that you try different sites. They're all different. It's not just the species are different, but the proximity is different. There's a different feel. The environments are different, as well as some will fit into your schedule better than others. And as soon as I get information back from you, we can construct the contact list so that you have a means of getting in touch with each other to coordinate your shifts. If the schedule is online and it's an editable document, so you just fill in your name and you can see who else is on that day. So you can coordinate who's going to pick up the equipment. We store our equipment in a locker down at the Salmon Creek Ranger Station. And somebody generally volunteers to pick it up and somebody will volunteer to drop it off. So you can coordinate with each other. There is some paperwork that state parks will want you to fill out. And so Amelia, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, thank you. The paperwork isn't too much. It's just 4 forms, and the first 2 are required and the last 2 are optional. It consists of a volunteer service agreement and a duty statement for Seabird Monitoring. And then the optional forms are if you would like to pre-designate a personal physician in case of injury while volunteering, and visual media consent if you're okay with us using your picture in publications. There's also 1 extra form if you're a minor. And then there's an online database that we use to keep track of volunteer time, but I'll send a link to that once the paperwork is completed if you haven't signed up on there yet. And I'm happy to create a profile on there if you don't feel like having to log in and enter your volunteer time, where I'm able to help. And as far as the paperwork goes, I can send it via DocuSign. So I'll put my email in the chat, but maybe when Hollis receives word back from those who are interested to participate, I can be looped in and we can figure out the best way to do the paperwork. Bet is not here tonight, but she's the volunteer coordinator with Stewards, and she's also willing to meet in person if you'd prefer to do the paperwork that way. And yeah, please feel free to reach out to me if you ever have any questions.
Okay, so if there's somebody that has not registered, then I won't have your email address to send something out to you tomorrow. So, Lisa, have you collected?
I think so. Maybe Heidi, did you register? I don't know that we had. If you don't mind sending your email or your phone in the chat to me, I would really appreciate it.
Okay, sure.
And I do have a question. What are the dates? What's the window? Like I know for Raptor, it's November to, this is certain dates. What's the window?
Yeah, I was just going to get to that.
Oh, sorry.
The first date coming up is Thursday, March 20th. We're going to have a site visit. And so we'll meet at the Salmon Creek Ranger Station at 9:30 in the morning, and we'll pick up the equipment there. And then we'll caravan up to the east parking lot of Bodega Head. And this will give you an opportunity to meet some of the veterans, and we can walk down to the vantage point where we do our count of Bodega Rock. If we have time that morning, we'll go over to the west side. There will not be any breeding activity going on the west side yet, but we'll probably have some common murres. I almost said camu. We'll have common murres likely on Bodega Rock, and some of the Brandt's cormorants will be arriving. The breeding season officially starts April 1st, but the common murre have been arriving earlier and earlier. They have been spotted rafting in the water around Gull Rock for about a month now, but they have yet to stay on the rock. They climb the rock and then they all disappear for a while. And so we are doing some preliminary counts. Gleason and Bodega Head, we start counting in April, but there's really not a whole lot of activity until we get into late April. And we go through the end of August, except for maybe Gull Rock, because that's practically all common murres, and they are the earliest arrivals. And as I said, they leave the rock when they're only 3 weeks old, and they can't even fly yet. These little guys, just their dads are in the water calling to them, and it's a leap of faith. They just jump. And in my email tomorrow, I'll send you a link to a couple of YouTube videos that it's really drama. It's real life drama. And to think of our little guys doing this after you've been watching them, prepare their nests and then feed their chicks and then take off on this leap into the water, it's kind of heartbreaking in some cases, but I mean, there were 8,000 of them. They're doing fine. So, Bodega Rock, we monitor that on Monday afternoons from 1 until 2. And the reason why is because we're looking south and the light is better at that time than at any other time during the day. Gull Rock, we monitor our shift is 8:30 to 9:30, and that's on Friday mornings. Gleason is from 10 to 11, and that's on Saturdays. And the west side of Bodega Head we do on Thursday mornings from 10 to 11.
Hey, Hollis, can I add something?
Please.
So what's really fun about this group is, so if you go out and you're asked to do the write-up, that's a fun thing to do. And I don't want to say it gets competitive, but there's a little bit of like, there's a lot of pride that will come out to the site that you go to. And people have gotten really creative by doing haiku, writing songs, all kinds of fun stuff. And so if you get asked to do the write-up, take that with some pride, and we all, because we all read it. We know when each group is out, and so we log in and we check our emails, and we want to see what's going on at each site. So just know, if you get asked to do it, be creative and tell us everything you see. And if you're a poet, throw some poetry in there, because we all appreciate it.
Now, that's the other thing that I meant to mention. We do have a Google group, email group. And so we share information with each other. And at the end of every shift, somebody writes up their counts.
Okay, I'm done.
And their notes about what else was going on in the environment, and send it out to the entire group so that we share that information. So you always know what's going on elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And last year we had a new monitor who opened his first email account with a haiku. And everybody loved it. And it caught on. And so everybody was opening theirs with a haiku. You don't have to.
Yeah.
But it's a fun group of people.
You'll get a lot of street cred if you do, though.
This is true. Are there any other questions? And Heidi, I see your information is here. I'm going to grab it.
I had a question. I'm not able to make the site visit on the 20th.
It's okay.
So I guess I would just come to one of the Saturday sessions at Gleason.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, there's that's understood. And so we don't really do a count on that day. It's really an opportunity for you to meet some of the others and to ask questions of some of the others and to get some hands-on experience with the equipment. It's really important that you get comfortable with setting up the scope, setting up the tripod. We open each shift. The first thing we do is we photograph the rock to document what's there. And it's a lot of equipment to get used to. And watching somebody else do it is informative, but not when you're doing it the first time yourself. The hands-on muscle memory is really, really important. And so we try to get as many people with some kind of experience with the equipment on that Thursday, but we can't get everybody doing it. And so you get that kind of experience on site. As I said, we have some really experienced volunteers that are really happy to help and instruct and show you. And it's a really good group of people. So don't be intimidated by the physical equipment aspects. And you all know your four-letter codes now. And you all know your cormorants, so you're halfway there.
That's right. And I don't know, Hollis, I don't know if you showed pictures of Gleason, but the birds have not been on Gleason. The corms have not been on Gleason as of late.
It's too early for them.
Yeah, they're hanging out on a rock that's actually closer, easier to see, that we call bushy. And all three of the species, because it used to be just the pelagic were on bushy, and the double crested and the brants were on Gleason. Now they're all on one rock. And every now and again, you'll see them kind of just hanging out, sunning themselves on top of Gleason. So if you go out to Gleason, you don't see anything on Gleason Rock, just look to the north and you'll see them all on Bushy Rock.
Their breeding activity really doesn't start until about mid-April, late April. And of course, because they're a little bit later than the common murres, this is how the common murres were able to gain their foothold and push them out on Gull Rock, even though they're like about a quarter of the size.
Yeah.
They're not all that pushy, they're just stubborn. But the reason that they're now on that rock, Kathy, is that, and that rock used to be just pelagics, is because we lost the peregrine falcons last year. We suspect it was the bird flu. And so we have been spotting some of them. And on my beach watch surveys, the last few surveys, I have seen some carcasses that are emblematic of a peregrine falcon kill. And I know it sounds strange to be excited about finding a carcass of a peregrine falcon kill, but we really are excited about seeing that once again. We want to see them back because they do protect our seabird colonies from the eagles. Colette.
Yeah. You have these lists of, just sort of the protocol for how to use the equipment and, all this stuff. Is that going to be sent to us in the information you'll be sending?
I sent out a manual this morning.
Yeah.
And there are sections in the manual that are specific to, very detailed on how to use the camera.
Okay.
And we may have pulled the information on the Kestrel because we were pulling the Kestrel. That's the weather instrument.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's still in the manual, but it's very detailed on how you use the camera and how we do the photography. And so you always have that written backup to refer to. There is a copy of the volunteer manual that is in, we have a duffel bag that holds all of our scopes and cameras and all of the equipment. And there is a copy of the volunteer manual in there. I'm not sure. It hasn't been updated because we did an update last year and have not done a reprint. But the information on the equipment has not changed. And that's basically the value of the manual, is the detail on the equipment.
Okay, what you sent us, is that the update or it's the old information?
That's the update.
Okay.
See, that's in PDF format. We haven't reprinted it for the duffel bag.
Okay.
But the important part is if you're ever on your own, if you go out on a Saturday on your own and you have not done the photography, for example, if you've always gone out with somebody else who's done the photography and you're uncertain of the camera settings, the cameras it's already preset for you as default, but if you're uncomfortable in any way, you can always refer back to the documentation on its use.
Okay, thanks.
And that has not changed. Well,
Okay.
it changed a few years ago when we got a new camera, but.
Okay.
Well, I'm really proud of your bird identification tonight. It's easier than some people anticipate. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the 20th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
I just looked back at my black oyster catcher photo from December in Marina Del Rey, and now I know which one is the male and the female. So
And it was so exciting when I finally learned how to tell them.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. Thank you.
You really have to look closely. It's just